So this is Mike, and today I'm joined by Tommy Keys. Tommy, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Mike. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, good to talk to you too. So I know you put a new album out was last year, right? Radio Days.
Just yeah, in October, September, October, about 3 months ago now. Radio
Okay.
Days. It's my sixth album, and
Okay.
there's been a lot of singles off it. I have a single at the moment. It's actually it's single number 6 of the album.
Okay.
I seem to be writing a lot of radio friendly songs at the moment.
Yeah, I do want to comment. By the way, I love the cover just because it takes me back to the days when. Now, of course, I never had to line a radio into a device like that to record,
Yeah,
but still the days, recording things off the radio, which kids, if your parents ever get upset at you for piracy, they used to do the same thing. They just recorded it off the radio.
it just tells you how old I am. That I won the cassette tape recorder that's on the cover of that album. I won a cassette tape recorder in a competition when I was about 16, and
Really?
they were only out for 2 or 3 years, and I didn't even know what it was. I had never seen such a thing. It was brand new at the time. I mean, obviously they're fairly retro now, but once I discovered that I could hook this up to the radio and record the new songs, and then sit down at the piano and start trying to work out how to play the songs. That's how my whole music career started. So I owe everything in music to that cassette recorder back in the 1960s.
Okay, well, see, and I was going to ask, what got you into
Yep,
music, and we have
that's
our
it.
answer right there.
Yep.
And I saw another video, by the way, so it looks like I'm going to think the Beatles were probably a big influence on you because I saw a lot of Beatles stuff on your wall.
Huge, absolutely. Look, I was born in 1955. That's not a secret because I have a track. I have an album called Aging with Attitude, and there's a track on it called Born in 1955. So I'm not keeping my age a secret. So in the era of the Beatles, when the Beatles first came to prominence, I was about 7, and when they broke up, I was about 15. So that whole formative era of getting to know music, the Beatles were the thing. Have you watched Get Back?
I
The new.
haven't watched it yet.
It is stunningly good, but if you're not a Beatles fan, and if you're not familiar with the music, you'll find it really, really boring because a lot of it is just hours and hours watching them in the studio. But if you like the music and if you've grown up with the music and you see how the music actually came about, it's absolutely gripping. So I'd really recommend it.
Okay. Now, for what you're writing, you've got a lot of different influences in there. So I'm trying to pinpoint exactly, is there a certain direction or is it just kind of, you're taking it how it goes. However the song comes out, that's how it's going to be.
I think that's it. I have a huge CD collection and before the CDs, it was a huge vinyl collection. I've I've been passionate about music all my life. In the 60s and 70s, it would have been, the Beatles and the Stones and so on. And then Americana in particular, I really, really like the type of, it used to be called alt country. I don't know what it's called now. The stuff like Whiskey Town and,
Right.
Uncle Tupelo, Gillian Welch, all that type of stuff. I really love that type of music. But I think if you scratch me far enough, you'll find a blues man in there somewhere because I
Right.
really, really love the blues. And there's a lot of blues structures and blues chords. Musicians will know what I mean if I talk about seventh chords. I use lots and lots of seventh chords because that's a kind of a blues chord. So there's a blues man deep in me. And I find as my writing is getting more and more in that direction now. And I'm kind of dipping back to a lot of the type of the chord structures of the 40s and the 50s, as well as maybe as I get older. I mean, that's before I'm old, but I'm not that old. That's before my time. But it's definitely old-fashioned music. It's got very little to do with the type of contemporary music that's coming out now.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned stuff from the 40s and 50s because I listened to a lot of your stuff before we talked, and the song "We've Got Time."
Oh yeah.
What it reminded me of was a lot of the music that I listened to when I was with when my
Yep.
grandmother was still alive. A lot of the 40s style music.
Yeah, absolutely. And I over the I run a music session in Dublin here in Ireland, a weekly session for singer songwriters. So we get a lot of performers from all around Ireland come to play at it. So I've got to know a lot of people, and I got to know a really, really good female jazz singer, and her voice is so like Billie Holiday. And
Yeah.
when I was doing that song, We've Got Time, I said, I just have to get, in fact, she has a jazz duo. I gave her the song first, and she's recording it for her own duo. But then I said, look, I'm putting that on my album. You have to come and sing it because your voice is going to be so perfect for this song, because there's a kind of a Billie Holiday vibe to this. And she does a really, really good job on it. And it's doing really well for me. I'm really happy with it.
Yeah, like I said, when I heard it, I was like, wow, this kind of takes me back. My grandmother passed, about 10 years ago. So for me, it was kind of like a connection back to when she was still around.
Yeah.
Also the Christmas song you did. What I really like about the song is that it has an older, more traditional vibe to it than a
Yeah.
lot of the more, because I don't like most of the modern Christmas songs. I was hoping I could make it this year without having to hear the Paul McCartney and Wings song in a store somewhere, and unfortunately that didn't happen. But yeah, it definitely has more of a traditional, older vibe to it, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, in the music, if you're talking, because I've had two. I had one about 4 or 5 years ago, and I've one recently called Christmas Time with You.
That's the one I'm
And
talking about.
yeah, I'm guessing you're talking about Christmas Time with You.
Yes.
The music is very old fashioned. The lyrics are actually about what is absolutely modern here in Ireland. It's about young Irish people who are spending Christmas in New York or San Francisco or Dubai or Sydney, and normally they would get home for Christmas. And of course, with everything that's going on at the moment, they can't get home for Christmas, and it's about missing everything that's going home. So the lyrics are bang up to date, but I've put it in that old-fashioned type of musical sense. And the guy who does the string arrangements for me, when he listened to it, he said, I'm going to put a very um, old style string arrangement of this song, because that's really what works with it, and it does. So it's that kind of combination of modern lyrics but very, very old musical styles. It seems to work for me, Mike.
No, it seems to work really good. Now I know before you started releasing music again, so you were in a band over there in the '70s, right?
Yeah,
Sidewinder.
yeah, that's right. Absolutely, you have done your research. Fair dues to you, as we say over here. Um, when I in the 1970s, and I'm sure it was the exact same in the US and everywhere else. Anybody that could play an instrument in the 1970s was in a band. That's what you did. And not only was everybody in a band, but there were places to play.
Right.
Everybody could find somewhere to play. It's very, very much harder now, because there are far fewer venues. Um, the pubs in Ireland would have music 7 days a week in those days. They don't do that anymore. This was before DJs and background music and all that type of thing. So I was in a band, and we did quite well. But I had another career going on at the time. I was working. I think in the States you call it the same as over here, civil servant. It's
Yep.
somebody who works in a government department.
Well,
Um,
yeah, you were the Secretary General of the Department of Transportation, Tourism, and Sport, correct?
that's what I ended up as, and I don't know what the equivalent term in the US is, but the Secretary General is essentially the head of the department that's not politically appointed. I think possibly in the States, whoever heads up the department is politically appointed, and if the Democrats take over from the Republicans, they kick them all out and put new ones in. We've a slightly different system
Right.
here. We've a slightly different system here. The politicians come in as the minister, but the head of the department is a civil servant, and he stays in place, or she stays in place. So I had that career. I was working my way up in that area of work, and it wasn't really compatible with driving around the country until 2 o'clock in the morning, playing gigs and all that type of thing. So
Right.
I kind of had to take a break. I took a career break from the music to kind of look after the day job, and that career break ended up lasting 40 years. But then I got got to the stage where it was time to retire, and I was out saying, well, this is great. I know exactly what I'm going to do in my retirement. I have a passion for music, and I can just go back to it. And it's been full on. It's just over 6 years now. 6 albums, lots of gigs, lots of videos, lots of interviews, and I'm really, really enjoying it.
So, with the band back in the 70s, of course, the music environment, like you said, was different then.
Yeah.
So, let's say in the 70s, we actually had availability of the internet.
Okay.
Because, of course, the internet has totally changed things for musicians around the world, you know, because you can get your
In
music
good
to
ways,
everywhere.
in good ways and bad ways, Mike.
That is true. So let's say there was an internet back then. Do you think it would have changed the direction for you? That maybe you could have pushed more musically and gotten your stuff out more and not had to keep the day job?
I don't. We will never know. We will never know. There were so many bands back at that time. There's a little story that my kids like telling their friends, possibly even more than I do. But back back in early 1979, January 1979. So it would have been 43 years ago now. The band I was in headlined in one of the biggest venues in Dublin. And earlier that same day, on the same stage, there was a teenage gig. There was a non-alcohol gig specifically for young people, where young bands could play for a young crowd. And it was a young 4-piece from Dublin were playing that day, and their name actually was U2. So our paths went in a very, very different direction. My kids like to tell their friends that U2 supported their daddy. That's technically not quite true, but they were on the same stage on the same day before I was.
they were
Have you
they were
heard of
kind
U2, Mike? I think so. I think you might have heard of
I
them over there in
I
America.
think I might have heard of a couple songs they
Yeah, yeah,
did.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
so
I
they
think they're
might be a
quite well
big
known. You should check them out.
they might be a big deal someday. You know, we might have to.
Yeah,
We'll see what happens with them.
yeah. Get them on for an interview.
Yeah, something tells me they might be a little busy.
Oh,
And they're gonna not going to want to talk to the likes of me.
I can ask. Oh, they
So
wouldn't
you,
talk to me either.
all right. So we're both in the same boat on that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so you've got a lot of. It looks like you've got a lot of guests that show up on your albums too. So these are all local there in Dublin, I assume.
They're Irish, yeah, not all in Dublin, but they are Irish. We have some super session musicians in Ireland. So there's a core group of session musicians who I have got from the very, very start, and they're really, really good. Um, a couple of them have played with Van Morrison. I mean, that's the level we're talking about. Really, really
Okay.
good. But after that, there are so many people that I have come across through the gigs that I run, and I have got them to come in and sing on songs and so on. And my daughter is a really, really good singer. She has a band of her own, so she
Oh,
has
okay.
all of my albums as well. So I'm one of these people that if I think something isn't broken, I don't try and fix it. So if you look at my albums, you'll kind of see um, from album to album, I tend to add one or two new people, but the core group that are there from the start are still there. And once somebody kind of comes on board, comes onto the team, I tend to hold on to them.
Well, that's good. So I know you've been gigging there quite a bit. I assume COVID's kind of thrown a little bit of a wrench in things, but as
We,
things get better in that regard, any plans on maybe taking the music outside your local
um,
area at all?
I don't know. I think I have a niche now that I'm very, very happy with. Um, COVID, of course, had a huge impact. But for about 3 or 4, when I came back to music, the first issue I had in going out to try and get gigs was that nobody knew me. Like, I might have been a name 40 years ago, but that meant nothing now. So I started doing what a lot of people do to establish themselves again. I started going around open mics and rocking up. Bit awkward when you're a keyboard player because you're going to have to lug a big keyboard under your arm. You can't just show up with a guitar on your back. But gradually, through the open mics, I started getting a bit of a name. And then one of the top ones in Dublin, which is a really good showcase for singer-songwriters, after a while, they invited me to host the night and run the night. And I've been doing that for a few years now. And that's kind of my niche now. So um, I don't, you know, I can play there every week. I can try out my original songs. So I really see albums and videos as the way I put myself out there now.
Right.
And the gigging is looked after by what I do locally. That's not to say that if I had the opportunity to go and do a few gigs somewhere else for a change, I was going to come over just before COVID hit. It was all arranged. Some guys from Key West in Florida had come over and they had played at our open mic, and they had really enjoyed it and built up a bit of a relationship with them, and they invited me to come over to them and play, and they said we'll be able to get you gigs to play and so on, and that was all organized. That was all going to happen in January 2021. And then obviously you couldn't even get into, if you weren't American, you couldn't even get into America in January
Right.
2021. So that didn't happen, but hopefully that will happen. That will happen sometime in the future.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, over here in the Northwest where I'm at in the Portland area, and I don't think we're doing it this year, but traditionally we have an annual jazz festival and an annual blues festival.
Laura Veers is from Portland, isn't she?
Who was that?
Laura Veers.
I don't know who that is, actually.
Laura Veers. I'm fairly sure she's from that area. No, she's a really, really good singer-songwriter who has played in Ireland a number of times. I've seen her, really like her. There's a lot of good music in Portland. I mean, I'm kind of into American music. There used to be a fantastic magazine called No Depression that I used to get, but unfortunately, like most magazines, it eventually stopped publishing. But there were a lot of great bands in Portland. It's in Oregon, isn't it?
Yeah, Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
So, and it looks like since you've got back into music, it looks like almost every year you've put a new album out. So,
Yeah.
Is there anything coming out this year?
Yeah, I have the songs written for album number 7, which is going to be called Story Time. And I will probably go into studio in the next couple of months. I'd like to get it out before the end of this year. Usually
Okay.
I kind of record in the first half of the year and then release around September, October. So I think that might be
Okay.
the plan again. When you get very, very old, if you have songs, there's a bit of urgency about getting in there and recording them because you mightn't be around. You mightn't be around to do them if you wait too long. I hope I'm joking.
No, I think you are. And I want to ask lastly too, since I know that you're a keyboard player. So, what kind of keyboard are you playing? Because see, I'm a musician too, so things like that interest me. And I'm sure that you probably have more than one keyboard that you used.
At home, one of my most prized possessions is a Bechstein acoustic piano that was made in 1905, and my parents bought it when I was about 9 or 10 years old. They bought it secondhand because they had identified, however they did, that I had a little bit of musical talent. So I've essentially had that piano since 1964, 65, and that sits in my sitting room, and I play that piano every single day. For gigs, I like Roland.
Okay.
I have a Roland RD 800, but I rarely bring that out to gigs because it's so heavy. If I'm doing a very big gig in a big venue or something, I would bring it out. But mostly, it's a Roland FP30, which is that little bit lighter. So I use that for gigs because it's just that little bit easier to transport and set up very, very quickly. But I really like to me, a keyboard has to feel like a piano. It has to have weighted keys. Playing it has to feel as if you're playing a piano. Otherwise it might as well just be a synth.
No, and I because I've played both, and yeah, there is definitely a different feel with those weighted keys. And the other ones, when it's just a synth, like you said, it kind of feels like a toy.
Well, you can't get the nuances and the passion and so on into it. It's just completely different. Look, if you're looking for an organ sound or a synth sound or anything like that, you probably don't want weighted keys, and that's fine. So, synths are absolutely brilliant. But if you want to feel as if you're playing piano and sound as if you're playing piano, you really do need weighted keys. And Roland do. This isn't a commercial for Roland because I know Yamaha and various others do really good ones as well. but I really like the feel of Roland. And they have a piano called the FP30, which is quite cheap. I don't know what it would be in the States, maybe $600 or so. That's all. I mean, that's not expensive, but it has weighted keys, and it's a lovely instrument to play.
Yep. Well, so hopefully anybody who's getting into this is going to hear that and go, maybe I'm going to check that out.
Check out the FP30. Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, it's been good talking to you. When the new album comes out, we're going to talk again.
I would be delighted anytime, Mike. I would absolutely be delighted.
All right. Well, it's been great talking today, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you very much, Mike.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Again.